From News Channel 2, this is a special edition of Face to Face, Normandy Remembered. Reporting from Normandy, here's Cate.
It was the largest invasion force in history. On D-Day, June 6, 1944, the Allies stormed the beaches of Normandy, France. American, Canadian, and British forces based in southern England launched a massive military campaign to reconquer a continent held captive by Adolf Hitler. It was an invasion that marked the turning point of the war in Europe, and ultimately it led to the destruction of Hitler's Third Reich. On this 50th anniversary of D-Day, we remember the sacrifice of the men who fought here and of those who died here.
Good evening, I'm Cate, and this is a special edition of Face to Face. We are in Normandy, France, overlooking what is commonly referred to as Omaha Beach, where thousands upon thousands of American soldiers, many of them from Maryland, lost their lives.
Today, most of those men are buried here at the American Cemetery in Normandy, not more than a few hundred yards away from where many of them were killed defending freedom. Tonight, we focus on the pivotal role Maryland soldiers played during the D-Day invasion through the memories of the men who were there.
We had been through training, a 19 months stationed in England, and all we had done was amphibious training, getting ready for that day. And here it was, that day was coming.
Lowry Brooks of Baltimore was a member of the 29th Division, a division comprised of units from Maryland as well as Virginia. 29th was the only National Guard division to participate in the Normandy operation on D-Day. Brooks would come ashore on Omaha Beach in the first wave. He and his comrades preceded only by paratroopers who landed in the hours of darkness to blow bridges and block roads to prevent a German counterattack on their beach's vulnerable flank. Guy Whitten, now living in Frederick, Maryland, was a member of the 101st Airborne Division. He remembers how he and the other paratroopers wanted to get out of their plane in the hours before dawn.
You wanted to get out because by that time it was just like the 4th of July outside. The whole sky was lit up, all kinds of ground fire, artillery fire, machine gun fire, and the planes were rocking, planes were exploding to either side of us, planes were going down, and we wanted to get the hell out of the plane.
History's greatest invasion was now underway. The paratroopers were on the ground, and by 6:30 a.m. the Allied soldiers were storming the beach. The toll would be tremendous.
Bodies were laying all over the place, equipment laying all over the place. Bodies were floating in the water. The water had a reddish hue to it, I would say from blood. But I looked down and I saw this little path like that I could go up this ravine. And there was troops going up it. So I said, that's the way I'm getting off of this beach.
Killing was the order of the day, and there was plenty of it.
First time I'd done that was on D-Day. A sniper up in a tree. And after my rifle fired, he fell.
You see, I can't remember that because I'm not the type of person that would like to take another person's life. And that's probably why I can't remember it, because I don't want to remember it.
But on June 6th, both Whitten and Brooks joined hundreds of other D-Day veterans who returned to Normandy this month to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the D-Day invasion. They walked once again on the beach where they fought, and they visited the graves of their young friends who were killed. And whether they wanted to or not, they remembered the pain and the loss of life.
Every year, veterans walk among the 9,386 White Crosses and Stars of David. The decades may pass, but the memories remain vivid.
The deafening noise of the mortar rounds fired by the warships in the English Channel, the wind and the rain, and the universal feeling of fear and the death. Those are the memories recalled this month as the D-Day veterans remember June 6, 1944. When we come back, we'll hear from the emotional Maryland veterans as they revisit the beach and attend ceremony after ceremony in their honor.
You're watching a special edition of Face to Face. We are reporting from Normandy, France. We'll be back after this.
This black and white war footage from June 6, 1944 is probably how future generations of Americans will remember D-Day. But in Normandy, France, the people relive what they call the Great Liberation through frequent reenactments like this one on Omaha Beach, performed for the visiting veterans during the 50th anniversary of D-Day. The French understand how important it is never to forget what Maryland's 29th Division and all the other Allied forces did for them on this 4-mile stretch of beach half a century ago.
So how important is Maryland to the people who live here in France today? Well, ask any one of these men you see behind me. They'll tell you they collect the traditional GI uniforms in tribute to the 29th Division.
It's all about them, all for them. It's at least what we can do, at least.
The veterans were also greeted in Normandy by some 150 National Guard members, most of them from Maryland. Half were members of today's 29th Infantry Division, the same division most of these veterans were part of during the war. The other half were made up of members of the 229th Army National Guard Band. The Guard members were at most every ceremony, playing for the veterans and providing the necessary color guard and state representation for its war dead. All of this for the men who gathered on Omaha Beach to recount their haunting memories of D-Day.
Fire spread down through the battery. It lost 4 trucks, 2 guns, and 35 men about the first 5 minutes ashore. And so that was a very rapid introduction to the combat scene.
Some of the vets collected pebbles from the beach, while others filled tiny bags full of sand to take back home with them.
For myself and some other friends of mine, relatives and so forth, because this is never going to leave. It won't perish. It's forever. And this is where we landed. So we can never forget this.
There's little chance that anyone on the beach in Normandy with these veterans could ever forget their unselfish contributions, especially the children of those who fought here.
It strikes you in the heart that all those people died to keep us free and these people free. But I'm just proud that my father made it, because if he hadn't, I wouldn't be here. And he's a hell of a man. I'm proud of him.
At the crest of the hill overlooking Omaha Beach, a monument was dedicated to the 29th Division, commemorating the courage of the Marylanders and the others who ignored the enemy fire, held the ground they had gained on the beach, and then inch by inch moved forward, up through the bluffs and onto the flat land above, in a fight they refused to lose. It was one of several moving ceremonies for the veterans. D-Day veterans from Maryland were visibly overwhelmed by the outpouring of gratitude and affection from the people of Normandy as they traveled from one ceremony to another, commemorating the 50th anniversary of this Allied invasion.
It's hard to find words to express the way I feel.
This was a parade led by Maryland Governor William Donald Schaefer in a town called St. Lo. During the invasion, Maryland's heroic 29th Division fought the Germans house by house in St. Lo on their way towards Paris. Lowry Brooks of Baltimore recalls how important it was for American troops to liberate St. Lo. Defeating the Germans here would be devastating to the German supply line.
That was a rail hub center for supplies to the Germans. If we could break that railhead, the whole German army on the Atlantic seawall and the Cerberg Peninsula wouldn't have a supply route.
Despite enormous losses, the 29th eventually succeeded in their mission to take St. Lo, and 5 decades later, their devotion is not forgotten. You can see it in the faces of the people who live here today as the veterans walk once again down the center of town. Men, women, and children applauding the soldiers that secured freedom for the children of France and the children of future generations.
To these children, I hope it brings back all the memories that we had to our own children. I hope they can use this as a lesson. I think the kids need it now. I think We've almost lost a generation that doesn't remember.
Prior to reaching St. Lo, American soldiers had to defy all odds by scaling one of the Germans' major defenses at a mind-boggling cliff called Pointe du Hoc. Rangers reached the top, forcing the enemy out of its concrete fortifications with the aid of heavy shelling from the ships in the channel. Today, Pointe du Hoc is a tourist attraction that leaves all who see it amazed that any American soldier could have survived.
These cliffs, straight up, you know, I've heard about them, and now that you look at them, you just look straight down, and these guys are trying to climb them.
I guess the only method you can really use is the hope method, and that is just go in there as fast as you can and hope like hell you don't get hit.
We walked around Pointe du Hoc with members of the 29th Division of the Maryland National Guard. Again, they were in Normandy representing the division which played such a key role in the success of D-Day. The soldiers attended every ceremony the 29th Division veterans attended and toured around some of the major battlefields like Pointe du Hoc, a history lesson they will never forget.
Now, this is just one of hundreds of huge craters that were created by those massive artillery shells that came flying in here. Don't think the Germans didn't take a pounding.
In the end, the Americans took Pointe du Hoc and kept on moving. So many stories of amazing American accomplishments were relived through the men who were there 50 years ago. This is one not to be overlooked, the airborne veterans' reenactment of their D-Day parachute jump. One by one they jumped from their plane, 41 in all, their chutes opening under a beautiful picturesque sky, so unlike the day they remember in 1944. 71-year-old Guy Whitten of Frederick, Maryland recalls the strong winds and rain, not to mention the fireworks-like display of anti-aircraft artillery that was shooting all around him. That was what it was really like in the darkness of D-Day. And yes, there was fear.
A real hero is a guy that has fear and goes in being afraid. It's only normal to have fear, and a lot of young people have asked me, I just wonder whether I could have handled it, whether I could have done this. I'm sure they could have done it, because I was never any great guy for courage. I think courage is something that you do because there has to be a cause, and you do it because you know it's the right thing to do.
Not since that night after surviving the jump on D-Day and the fighting that followed has Whitten been back to Normandy until this month. Here, 50 years to the day later, he floated to the ground safely on a much friendlier watch with his comrades from the 101st and 82nd Airborne Divisions. Two of the veterans were injured, the most serious being that of a man who had to rely on his emergency chute after his main chute tore away. He apparently hit the ground too hard, hurting his back. Another man was cut in the face by his parachute's harness strap when it deployed. But these were injuries not to be compared with the jump near St. Eglise on D-Day. A large number of the men were killed before hitting the ground when the strong winds blew them into the tiny village amidst a strongly manned German position. Today, a figure of a parachutist hangs atop a church in the center of town in tribute of Private John Steele, who became entangled in the steeple that day and survived by pretending to be dead.
It really gives you an eerie feeling to stand here in St. Eglise and see that parachute still blowing in the breeze as a tribute to the American soldiers who lost their lives or were taken captive here. It's also impressive to see how the French have responded to what took place.
Every American visiting here feels the gratitude of the French people.
When they see you, and what are they saying?
Thank you.
American.
Yeah, they're appreciative.
Very much. Really appreciative.
It's not at all surprising that so many thousands of people showed up to watch Maryland's Guy Whitten and the other veterans make their anniversary jump. After all, these are the men who gave these people back their freedom, and the ones who represent the hundreds of other American paratroopers who are no longer around to thank.
I feel that our comrades may be looking down on this and really enjoying it. You have to have faith, basically, and I do feel that somehow or other this message gets back there somewhere or another, that we're kind of like representing them, and it brings more attention to just what went on then by having us jump.
As the Allied forces stormed the beaches of Normandy, women all across America were taking the workforce by storm, doing their part for the war effort. News Channel 2's Andy Barth has the story of a Rosie the Riveter, Baltimore style.
Carrie Bowers looks like everybody's ideal grandmother, but 50 years ago, she was part of the war machine.
Working for victory, Rosie, the Riveter.
Like a lot of other women in Baltimore, Carrie went to work making airplanes in what had been the General Motors auto assembly plant on Browning Highway. She really was a riveter, and there really was a national consensus about the war.
And nobody liked it, and they didn't want to see their children go there either, you know, the boys. And they were always hoping that the war would be over so that they could come home.
But first, there was a job to be done and a war to be won, and for 8 hours a day, Carrie, who is now 78, stood on her feet and drove rivets into Navy fighters.
And you had to be very careful to get that there rivet in that to hold, you know. And it had to be in there just so. And that was a job hammering all day too, you know.
What part of the plane did you work on?
The fuselage. That's the part that goes on the big body of the plane, you know.
Ms. Bowers made about 40 cents an hour for her work. She was glad to serve, but never saw a future on the assembly line. When it was over, did you want to keep
the job? No, no. I was just glad it was over that they could come home, you know.
Women helped make those planes. Did it ever occur to you that women should fly them and fight in the war?
Well, I don't know. I never thought about it myself. Everybody tried to put in everything that they had to try to get the war over.
I'm Andy Barth for Face to Face.
Some 150,000 soldiers swarmed the beaches of Normandy 50 years ago. Less than 500 of them were African American. News Channel 2's Jesse Jones spoke with one of those soldiers who wasn't accepted then and feels unappreciated now.
It's been 50 years since Corporal Denver Blackwell piloted his amphibious transport unit, better known as a duck, to the shores of Normandy on D-Day.
When we went in, we saw the obstacles on the beach to stop tanks and let things from running across the beach. We saw a little further inland the paratroopers that hadn't that far from the ground, that didn't make it down, up there dead. We saw death all around.
We know that the last grains of sand in Nazi Germany's hourglass were spilled because of that famous beach assault. We know that many died, giving the ultimate sacrifice for freedom. Yet in the hour of celebration and remembrance, Denver says all he sees on the shores of France is a beach of white sand and a sea of white soldiers. A slight to the black men who also fought and served in that day of victory.
And don't see a black face there. And I know that we went in today to say, let's fight.
Each year, the members of the 815th, 16th, and 17th Amphibious Truck Companies who fought on D-Day gather to celebrate. But this year, anger ruled the day.
I'm more bitter this week than the day that I was drafted and went into a segregated army. I was more bitter today. Did we do anything? That's what's killing me. Did we do anything? Wasn't there, out of all those thousands of men they said was there, didn't they have one black officer there? If so, where is he?
They fought for a country that practiced racial separation during war and peace, at home and abroad. Yet these black soldiers did what they were asked to do and more, and then to perform these tasks with valor, with pride.
It was pride to come home to my girlfriend and see me dressed up. It was pride, yeah, it was
It was a pride that I was a healthy American in the United States Army, and I was there doing my part in the service. Ooh, a lot of pride.
I'm Jesse Jones reporting for Face to Face.
President Bill Clinton commemorated the 50th anniversary of D-Day with 5 heavily attended appearances around Normandy, but none perhaps more important to the D-Day veterans than this one at the U.S. Cemetery overlooking Omaha Beach, the final resting place for hundreds of heroic Maryland soldiers.
When they were young, these men saved the world.
We come in right down here, right over here.
Gray-haired veterans of Maryland's legendary 29th Division can be assured that these Maryland National Guardsmen won't forget. Here to take part in the D-Day ceremonies, the younger Guardsmen were often moved to tears from the veterans' stories of tremendous sacrifice. And the younger men expressed their appreciation at every opportunity.
I want to say I'm very proud of what you and your comrades did. And it's an honor to be in your presence.
Well, it's an honor being with you. You're wonderful young men who still believe in some patriotism and want to do something.
It was that same spirit of patriotism and love of country and freedom that was so prevalent during the days before and after D-Day. The feelings that somehow justify, in a sad way, the loss of so many young lives. 9,386 American soldiers buried here at the American Cemetery alone serve as a reminder of those feelings. It was because of what happened on D-Day, June 6, 1944, that Lowry Brooks of Baltimore felt it necessary to be in Normandy for the 50th anniversary.
Did you see? Not at this point. I hadn't fired a shot. But before the day was over, I fired several.
It is because of what happened then that Lee Hausman will take home to Maryland several bags of sand from the beach.
What will we remember? What should we remember?
I can't talk about it.
Forgetting what happened then seems impossible after one tearful ceremony after another, but that is clearly the fear expressed from every veteran we met. They want this anniversary to be a lesson for the young. For Guy Whitten of Frederick, who reenacted his parachute jump on the longest day. And for Lowry, Lee, Edmund, and all the others, President Clinton's words rang true. Let us not forget, when these men were young, they saved the world.
This has been a special edition of Face to Face. I'm Keith Cate. Thanks for watching, and good night from Omaha Beach in Normandy, France.